I'm historian Lindsay Peterson, and I'm the co-director of the Civil War and Reconstruction Governors of Mississippi project. Today I'm going to walk you through the setup for our educational role-playing game, Brine Blood, which helps students analyze primary sources and it introduces them to the arguments about emancipation as a process and Confederate nationalism's failures. So you only need a few things to get started, and we will set them up and then walk you through the basic structure of the gameplay so that you know how to play the game. But also please remember that there's an instructional guide, and you should read that in its entirety before playing the game. So you'll need a few things. You will need scratch paper to keep tallies of the SALT and freedom scores, as well as victory points for each faction, and a writing utensil, of course. And then you're going to issue dice and a couple of sheets of paper to the students. So these are the action sheets for Team Pettis. You'll notice anything with Pettis is featured in brown, and then the round numbers and event numbers for each action are up here. So you're gonna distribute round 1, events 1 through 7 to the students. They do not need their other 2 additional sheets behind this until they're instructed to do so in the event slides. And then there's a similar set of sheets, same thing for the enslaved workers, which is always in navy blue. It's labeled here, and then you can see the round 1 sheets here. And this has the actions for both factions that they can select from when playing the game. Each group is going to need a board game, which is just 1 sheet of paper and 5 tokens to go with it. So the board game features a couple of things. It has an unrest tracker, which goes along the outside here. It also marks when you're going to open up the unrest update card, which you can print here and then fold into a trifold, which they will play with during the game. It's an additional primary source for them to analyze. And then the Pettis factions categories that they're going to keep track of are labor right here in brown, and their Confederate troops right here in brown as well, and tokens for each one of those. So the token starts on the start here, and that will indicate how many dice they're allowed to roll. So if this token is over here, they can roll 3. If it's here, they roll 2. Right, but they'll always start here, and it can never decrease below 1 dice. The enslaved workers keep track of their agency here, and their U.S. troop scores, same thing with the number of dice that they roll. For dice, we suggest using and distributing, using a dice roller. It keeps the chaos at bay, and then distributing 8 dice of 2 different colors if you have it. So in this case, we've got blue representing the enslaved workers, or Union blue, and I've got green representing the Confederacy here. It makes it a lot easier when you are doing battles if they're in different colors, because it's a lot easier to compare how many, who won the victory by the largest number of pips if they are in 2 different colors. Right, so we suggest that setup. And then finally, the groups will get a copy of each one of these within each group. Each group is about 4 students. We recommend having 2 students play on each faction, and then they will play independently in between each event, but the class will work together to read and analyze a primary source on the projector. And this way you can control the discussions that are happening, ensure that students are reading and comprehending the source that they read. So the event slides will be displayed in presenter view. The reason for that is you'll notice that we have some questions developed for educators to ask of the students when they are on those slides. So in presenter view, you can view those, and the students can read the excerpts from their primary sources and follow the instructions. So to get started, they'll start with their round 1 action sheets, events 1 through 7. We've got 1 for Pettis, 1 for enslaved workers. You are going to read the Mississippi Ordinance of Secession and discuss, and then begin by starting with event 1. So the primary source is here. This has a visual description for accessibility purposes, and then there are some discussion questions. So read the event as a class, discuss as a class. You can, of course, ask your own questions, but each one of those questions has been developed and tested by historians and educators. And then you'll proceed to the event 1 action slide. So the game action right away tells us to increase the USA troops. So you'll see that that's in blue. The enslaved workers will take their USA troop score, and they will increase it 1, right? So +1 is just moving 1 square on the board, and then they're presented with a decision, right? What will you do? You can ignore. This is in direct response to the excerpt from this previous slide and the actual source there. And so they can ignore and the event will end, or they can attempt to run to Union lines. When you see a roll 1 through 6 options, this means you're counting the number of pips on the dice. So if I am in the enslaved worker faction, I'm gonna roll my dice. I rolled a 2. That falls within the 1 through 3. That means my attempt to run to Union lines was successful, and I'm gonna increase my agency score by 1. Right, so agency here, increase by 1, and then decrease the labor score by 1. Remember, it can't go below 1 dice, so it just stays the same and you move on. So after you complete the event actions listed on the slide, then you move to the action sheets, and it always starts with the Pettis faction. You'll see that every turn is labeled. So we have turn 1, so they're going to follow these instructions and select from these options. Then it will be the enslaved worker options for turn 2. They'll select from here. Then we go to turn 3, where they're going to first convert their labor to salt and then select from these options based on how much salt they have. And then turn 4, they'll convert their agency to freedom, and then they'll select these options based on the number of freedom points that they have. So let's see what that looks like. For example, the Pettis faction can choose to call for voluntary impressment. So again, roll 1 through 6 means we're counting the pips on the dice. So they're going to roll their dice. They rolled a 6, so nothing happened. Their call failed. Their score stays the same. Then we turn to the resistance action. They're going to organize. So they're going to increase the unrest on the game board. So you'll notice that there's a couple things that often confuse students. There's these negative points along the game board for the unrest tracker. These are tabulated at the end of the game. So wherever this marker ends at the end of the game, let's say it is all the way down here on -10, that means the Pettis faction is going to lose 10 victory points. That's not game marker spot 10 or anything like that. It just gives you the number of victory points they're losing at the end to represent how positively the home front, including and Confederate enlisted soldiers, felt towards the Confederate war effort. So in this case, right, it starts here. The enslaved worker faction increased that by 1, so they're just going to move it up 1, right? So they'll move it up 1 to increase unrest. You move it down to decrease unrest. Then we have an option here to roll as well. So roll 1 through 6. So they're going to take their blue dice, roll it. They rolled a 4, so they're going to increase their agency. So go to the agency, and they will increase that as well. So these are going to move frequently throughout the game, which is why you're going to want some tokens on that. Then we go to the next step here. So the first step is to convert our labor to salt. Our labor marker is on 1 dice. Okay, so that means we're going to roll a single dice for the Pettis faction. And the number of pips they roll is the number of salt that they have. In this case, they have 1 salt. They will write on their tally, right, 1 salt here. You'll want a tally or pens or pencils because they're gonna spend this. It's gonna change constantly throughout the game. And then they can select from one of these 3 options here. So in this case, if they had 10 salt, which they do not, they could sell it for a victory point. When there's an asterisk and it says up to 3 times per action, that means that students can save their action economy. If they had 30 salt, they could do this 3 times, spend 30 salt and get 30 victory points, or 20 or 10, it's up to them. If that option is not presented, it's not available to them. In this case, they have 1 salt, so all they can do is attempt to run the blockade. So they're gonna roll, count their pips. They rolled a 3. In this case, they did not run the blockade and nothing happens for them. Their turn is over and their round 1 event 1 is over. And so they will also do a similar action. They're going to convert their agency to freedom. You'll see here that their agency has 2 dice to roll. So they're going to roll that. They have 6 pips, and so they will get 6 freedom points. So they'll write down their 6 points. And then they also have 3 options to choose from here. So again, there's one where they can do it 3 times. There's one option here. They don't have 10 yet, so they can roll attempting an escape. So roll 1 through 6. So they rolled a 5, their escape failed and nothing happens. And event 1 is over. And so they will wait until the class, all of the class is done with event 1, and then you will turn back to the slides. So once you're here, you'll progress to event 2, reading the primary source excerpt, asking the questions, discussing the primary source for understanding. Then you'll move to the game actions slide. In this case, enslaved workers will make a decision here. And then it returns back to the action sheets where you proceed through turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, and then return to the slides. Eventually, that's going to take you through 7 actions. You're going to get to action 8. You'll read the source, proceed to the next game action. And then this is when you're going to distribute new sheets to the students. So their options, their powers change. Things get a little bit harder for Team Pettis. Things actually get a little bit easier for enslaved workers based on the laws that were passed in event 8, and you will proceed like normal. So you get the new action sheets. Enslaved workers will make a decision, right? They'll have to roll and see whether they escape or not, and then they will return to the same setup as before. So turn 1 labeled here, they'll select one of these options. Then it goes to turn 2 with the enslaved workers, who will select one of these options. Then the same, you convert labor to salt, and then select from these options here, and then they will convert their agency to freedom and select from those options here. You'll continue to progress until you get to the final round, which is in round 15. So in round 15, same thing happens. Read the excerpt, hold your discussion, switch to your round 3 action sheets. At the same time, they will be making rolls to see how their troop scores shake out. So I'm going to adjust the board very arbitrarily here to give us an example of a couple things that will come up in the last round that are a little bit different. So it's generally the same, but effectively there are a few key changes. So in turn 1, they will still select from their 3 options, very much like they've done the entire game. Proceed to turn 2, same thing, 3 options like typical. And then when you get to turn 3 and turn 4, things are a little bit different. So familiar but different. They'll continue to convert their labor to salt, rolling based on what they have here. And then they have an option to spend 10 salt to change the unrest or the troop score. And then again, in the self-emancipation action or turn 4 for the enslaved workers, same thing. They're going to convert their agency to freedom, and then they have an option to spend 10, or in this case 30 freedom points to adjust these scores here. And then what's different is there is a shared turn 5. So there are skirmishes and battles before this, but in the final round, these 2 factions are going to battle each other every single round in a shared turn 5. And so when that happens, what you do, and anytime a battle happens, you will look at the troop scores here and you will roll the dice according to the number that you have. So in this case, the Confederacy has 2 dice and enslaved workers have 3 dice. So they're gonna roll. This is why the colors are nice. You can easily compare and see here that they have a 12. The enslaved workers have a 12 and Pettis has 5. And so the enslaved workers win that battle. If you look at the sheet, it explains what to do for the victory. So typically in battles, the victor gets a victory point, right? So they would write down their victory point there. If there's a tie, the different parts of the game lay out what to do if there's a tie. And sometimes it's a reroll, sometimes it is ties to go to Pettis, sometimes it is based on different circumstances. So they'll battle together in a shared turn 5 every single round. And then finally, you'll work your way through the 21 primary sources in the game, and then the game is over. So you look at the VPs. So let's say Pettis has 5 VPs. The enslaved workers, let's say Pettis has 10 VPs. Enslaved workers have 6 VPs. But don't forget that this is not their final VP score. You have to subtract the number of VPs that are here. So in this case, you're going to subtract 6 VPs from Pettis, leaving them with 4 total, and enslaved workers with 6 total, meaning that enslaved workers have 1 because they have the highest number of VPs. If there is a tie, we have 2 breakdowns. So you can compare the salt and freedom scores here, and whoever has the highest is the winner to break the tie. And if they still have a tie after that, you can compare the troop scores. So in this case, the enslaved workers would still win because they have a higher troop score than the Confederacy. So whoever has the highest VPs wins the war. And by the time they are done, they have read through 21 to 22 primary sources and hopefully better understood them based on the actions and outcomes and feelings that they felt in response to those primary sources that the game allowed them to feel and explore.